fulfilled your brief. And so I'm a great believer that we must have free expression, and not greatly, because it's a cyclical thing. 1 minute, certain jokes or certain attitudes and outlooks are just out of fashion. When the comedian said it, I don't know what the atmosphere was in the room. If people pay to see a comedian, they've got to accept whatever. And in the end, the whole point of a joke is to entertain people. And if people are not entertained, then you haven't.
Did you know someone was actually arrested for calling a police horse gay? This isn't a joke from a Rowan Atkinson sketch. It happened in real life, proving his warnings about free speech weren't just comedy. Atkinson sees a dangerous new intolerance spreading, where criticism gets confused with insult. In the next few minutes, you'll see how one of comedy's greatest minds predicted exactly where our outrage culture was heading. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Imagine being told you can't make a joke about something because it might hurt someone's feelings. Now imagine that someone is Mr. Bean. The man behind the rubber-faced character, Rowan Atkinson, has some pretty strong opinions about free expression. In fact, he ranks it as the second most important thing in life, right after food and before shelter. That's how seriously he takes it. And he's not afraid to say it, even when the current climate wants comics to walk on eggshells. These days, it seems like comedians are expected to issue public apologies every time someone somewhere gets upset about a joke. But Atkinson isn't playing that game. I'm a great believer that artists should never apologize for their art, he stated clearly. This isn't just stubbornness, it's a principled stance from a man who has spent decades making people laugh. What makes Atkinson's view cut through the noise is his crystal clear reasoning. Comedy has one job: to entertain. If a joke bombs, that's just a failed joke, not some moral failing that requires public penance.
Comedy's job is to offend, and it seems nowadays people are very careful about what they joke about. Do you worry about where comedy is going?
For primetime TV, that's a pretty obvious statement, but you'd be surprised how people like to abuse the context of comedy. And people often say, did you hear that joke that comedian said in that Netflix special? Not greatly, because it's a cyclical thing. 1 minute, certain jokes or certain attitudes and outlooks are just out of fashion.
As he sees it, comedy isn't meant to be dissected for ethical violations. It's meant to make you laugh. He's also smart enough to distinguish between context and content. Not every joke works in every setting. That's just common sense. A joke that kills in a comedy club might bomb at a funeral, but that doesn't mean the joke shouldn't exist at all. The problem comes when jokes get ripped from their original context and shared elsewhere, where they weren't intended to be heard. For Atkinson, the solution is refreshingly simple. If you paid to see a comedian perform, you've basically signed up for whatever content they provide. Don't like it? That's your call, but don't demand they change their act to suit your personal tastes. And yes, he really did say people being offended is their problem. His exact words were, "If people are offended, that's their problem, not yours." That's not just a throwaway line. It represents a fundamental view of where responsibility lies in the relationship between artist and audience.
And in the end, the whole point of a joke is to entertain people. And if people are not entertained, then you haven't. They provide. I'm a great believer that artists should never apologize for their art. You put something out there, you paint a watercolor, fulfilled your brief. And so I'm a great believer that we must have free expression. And
that firm stance on offense might seem harsh until you realize something shocking. Atkinson's old comedy sketches weren't just random jokes, but eerily accurate predictions of our future. Decades ago, on Not the 9 O'Clock News, Atkinson played a racist police officer making absurd arrests for crimes like walking on cracks in the pavement and walking in a loud shirt in a built-up area during the hours of darkness. He even arrested someone for urinating in a public convenience, which is literally what public toilets are designed for. What makes this so freaky is that these ridiculous comedy bits from the 80s have basically come true. Atkinson himself has pointed out real-life cases that match his absurdist serious humor, people actually getting arrested for calling a police horse gay, a teenager getting busted for calling Scientology a cult, and a cafe owner arrested just for displaying Bible passages.
In comedy, you must be able to make jokes about absolutely anything. I mean, the only question is you would be wise to choose a context in which it's going to be appreciated when the comedian said it. I don't know what the atmosphere was in the room. If people pay to see a comedian, they've got to accept whatever. If they don't want you to work for them again, then that's, that may become your problem, but you've done your bit and you've done your best, and
these aren't made-up examples. They actually happened. Atkinson isn't just complaining about political correctness here. He's identified something much more concerning about our legal system. When we make being offensive illegal, suddenly everything becomes potentially illegal. Think about it. Criticism, sarcasm, having a different opinion. All of these could be interpreted as insulting by someone who's determined to be offended. This is what Atkinson brilliantly describes as the new intolerance. It's a culture that pretends to be progressive and open-minded, but actually does the opposite. It shuts down any voices that make people uncomfortable. The people pushing this mindset often say they're only intolerant of intolerance, which Atkinson exposes as completely contradictory. You're still being intolerant, you've just changed what you're intolerant about. The really wild part?
Because not all jokes suit all contexts. The joke you tell around a table in a restaurant with some friends is not necessarily something did you think that was right or wrong? And all I say is, I wasn't there. I haven't heard the joke. I wasn't in the audience when you make a joke, you make a television show, whatever it is. If people are offended, that's their problem. It's not yours. You've done your bit.
Atkinson was warning us about this through comedy sketches decades before it became our reality. His fictional cops arresting people for ridiculous non-crimes were supposed to make us laugh at how absurd that would be, not provide a blueprint for the future. So what's really at stake here? Rowan Atkinson isn't just fighting for his right to make people laugh. He's diagnosing a societal problem that goes way beyond comedy clubs. In his own words, we need to build our immunity to taking offense, the same way we develop resistance to childhood diseases. The solution isn't avoiding potentially offensive content, it's exposure to more of it. As Atkinson puts it, the best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it. Behind the scenes, there's what Atkinson calls an outrage industry working overtime. Media outlets and even police departments feel pressured to respond to every perceived slight. He points out how the police panic and they scramble around and then grasp the most inappropriate lifeline of all Section 5 of the Public Order Act. This creates a chilling effect where people self-censor out of fear. The Mr. Bean star's message is clear. True freedom isn't comfortable. It includes the freedom to offend, to challenge, and yes, to make jokes that not everyone will like.